Rat, she conquered the planet by never leaving your side. She laughs in a pitch you can't hear every time you tickle her. She can squeeze her entire body through a gap the width of your thumb. Her teeth grow 5 inches a year and never stop growing, ever. She got blamed for a plague that new research says she may not have caused. She weighs about as much as an apple and has still outlasted empires. When I started digging into rats, I genuinely could not stop for days. Every fact I found seemed to cancel out something I thought I already knew. Today we're talking about the rat, the one mammal that never left your side. Stay to the end. Halfway through, you'll learn why she can't be flushed away. She's on every continent on Earth except Antarctica, and she got there entirely by boat. There are roughly 66 different species in her genus alone, and you've probably met 2. And depending which study you trust, she may not even be the animal that ended medieval Europe. Let's start with the name, because even her scientific name is a lie. Her official name is Rattus norvegicus, literally the Norwegian rat. She has absolutely nothing to do with Norway, not historically, not genetically. In 1769, the naturalist John Birkenhout needed a Latin name for this rat fast. He assumed she'd arrived in England on Norwegian timber ships and guessed wrong. Genetic studies later traced her real origin to northern China and Mongolia. She spread west along human trade routes centuries before anyone named her. By the time Europeans got around to naming her, she was already everywhere. She's also been a stowaway on ships for literally thousands of years of human seafaring history. Sailors historically both hated and half respected her, since a ship full of rats meant grain aboard. Some old sailing superstitions claimed rats abandoning a ship predicted that it would sink. The phrase, "rats leaving a sinking ship," almost certainly comes directly from real maritime observation. Rats can sense a listing flooding hull well before the crew fully understands what's happening. Leaving early wasn't superstition so much as an early accurate warning system nobody else had. And here's a detail almost nobody knows: there are actually 2 very different rats. The brown rat, Rattus norvegicus, is the one in your walls and sewers today. The black rat, Rattus rattus, ruled European cities for over 1,000 years first. The black rat arrived with the Romans, then again in the Middle Ages, in 2 waves. She lived in roofs and rafters, an agile climber built for wooden buildings. Then in the 18th century, the brown rat showed up, and everything changed fast. The brown rat is bigger, more aggressive, and a far better digger than a climber. As Europe swapped thatched roofs for brick and tile, that advantage mattered. Burrowing beat climbing, and the brown rat quietly pushed the black rat out. Reliable records place her in Ireland by 1722, England by 1730, France by 1735. Germany got her by 1750, Spain by 1800. She reached North America around 1750. She rode the Industrial Revolution's ships, carts, and grain stores the whole way. Wherever humans built trade networks, she was already sitting in the cargo hold. Her genus, Rattus, actually contains around 66 recognized species worldwide. Almost everyone on Earth has only ever encountered 2 of them, brown and black. She's now established on every continent except Antarctica, entirely thanks to human shipping. Sailors carried her unknowingly to islands that had never had a land mammal like her before. On many Pacific islands, she became a genuine ecological disaster almost overnight. Ground-nesting seabirds had evolved with zero defense against a fast, climbing, egg-eating predator. Entire island bird populations collapsed within decades of her arrival on a single ship. Conservationists now spend millions of dollars specifically trying to remove her from these islands. Now to the part everyone thinks they already know: the Black Death. For over a century, the story was simple: rats carried fleas, fleas carried plague. In 2018, researchers at the University of Oslo actually tested that story properly. They built mathematical models of 9 documented plague outbreaks in Europe. They compared 3 explanations: rat fleas, airborne spread, and human fleas and lice. The rat flea model was too slow; it couldn't match how fast the disease actually spread. In 7 out of 9 regions studied, human fleas and lice fit the real data best. Late medieval Europeans rarely bathed, and both parasites were extremely common on people. The plague may have jumped human to human far more than it ever needed a rat. This doesn't fully clear rats; they still spread plague today in places like Madagascar. She's still a real public health concern today. just not for the specific disease she's remembered for. Modern rats can carry leptospirosis, a bacterial infection spread through contaminated water. They can also carry hantaviruses, which spread through dried droppings and urine dust. New York City's own health department has literally called her the sworn enemy of public health. None of that makes the Black Death her fault. It just means the reputation isn't purely mythology either. But the Black Death specifically may be one of history's most successful smear campaigns. Now let's talk about what this animal's body can actually do, because it's absurd. An adult rat can compress her ribcage and squeeze through a gap barely 20 millimeters wide. Each rib is hinged where it meets the spine, letting the whole cage briefly collapse. If her skull fits through a hole, the rest of her will follow right behind it. She can jump vertically nearly a meter from a standing start if she needs to clear an obstacle. She can also fall several stories and usually walk away without serious injury. Her skeleton and reflexes are built to absorb impacts that would seriously hurt an animal her size. She can climb almost any rough vertical surface, brick, wood, insulated cable, all of it. Smooth vertical metal is one of the very few surfaces that reliably stops her cold. That single fact is the entire design principle behind most modern rat guards on ships and buildings. She's also a genuinely serious swimmer, not just a reluctant one. She can tread water for up to 3 days straight without stopping. She can hold her breath underwater for roughly 3 minutes at a time. That combination is exactly why rats occasionally surface inside people's toilets. They don't teleport in, they swim up through the sewer pipe and the plumbing itself. Her teeth never stop growing, not for a single day of her adult life. Left unchecked, they'd grow roughly 5 inches in a single year. That's exactly why she gnaws constantly, on wood, wires, pipes, anything hard enough. It's not curiosity or destruction for its own sake, it's dental maintenance non-stop. Skip a few weeks of gnawing and her own teeth would eventually grow into her skull. Her diet is genuinely almost unlimited. She is about as omnivorous as a mammal gets. Grain, fruit, meat, insects, garbage, pet food, even soap and candle wax are all fair game. In a real pinch, she'll eat her own droppings to recover vitamins her gut didn't fully absorb the first time. She needs remarkably little water if her food already contains enough moisture already. That flexibility, more than any single trait, is why she thrives in almost any human settlement on Earth. Wherever humans throw away food, she has already worked out how to use every bit of it. Her eyesight, meanwhile, is genuinely poor, especially for detail and distance. She compensates with whiskers, dozens of them, each one mapping the space around her. Those whiskers brush walls and objects and build a live 3D model of her surroundings. She also has an exceptional memory for routes. Once she learns a path, she keeps it. And her sense of smell is extraordinary, sensitive enough to detect specific diseases. That last detail, by the way, is not a throwaway line. We'll come back to it. She's also famously suspicious of anything new in her environment, a trait called neophobia. A new object, a new smell, or new food dropped into a familiar space gets avoided for days. She'll let a low-ranking, expendable member of the colony test it first, cautiously, in small bites. This is exactly why rat poison rarely works with a single big dose left out all at once. She nibbles a tiny amount, waits, and only returns for more once nothing bad has happened. Pest controllers call this bait shyness, and it evolved specifically to defeat poisoners like us. The 50 kHz laughter chirp isn't her only ultrasonic call, not even close. Under real threat, she switches to a completely different alarm call around 22 kHz. That lower distress call travels farther and warns every rat within earshot to scatter. She is, in effect, running 2 separate frequency channels for 2 completely different emotional states. Her hearing range runs far higher than a human's, easily up into true ultrasound. In low light, her eyes are actually reasonably functional, tuned for a nocturnal lifestyle. It's bright daylight and fine detail that give her real trouble, not darkness itself. Rats live in structured colonies with a fairly clear social hierarchy inside each burrow system. Dominant males get priority access to food, favored nesting spots, and receptive females. Subordinate rats still cooperate constantly, grooming each other and sharing warmth while sleeping. Colonies defend a home territory and will fight off unfamiliar rats that wander into it. A rat's home range can stretch from a single building to several hundred meters depending on food. Males generally range farther than females, who tend to stay closer to an established nest. She's also mostly nocturnal, most active right around dusk and dawn to avoid predators and people. Now to reproduction, because this is where the math turns genuinely alarming. A female rat reaches sexual maturity in about 5 weeks of life. Her gestation period lasts only 21 to 23 days from conception to birth. A single litter typically contains 6 to 12 pups, sometimes considerably more. She can go back into heat and get pregnant again within hours of giving birth. Under ideal conditions, she can produce 5 or 6 litters in a single year. Pest control researchers commonly cite one specific number for this math. A single starting pair of rats can theoretically produce around 1,250 descendants in 1 year. That number assumes unlimited food, space, and 0 predators, which almost never happens. In the real world, starvation, disease, predation, and territory keep populations in check. But the math explains exactly why a small infestation can explode within months. And reproduction isn't even her most impressive trick against us. Evolution is. In 1950, humans introduced warfarin, a slow-acting anticoagulant, as the standard rat poison. Within about a decade, resistant rat populations had already started showing up in the wild. The resistance traces back to mutations in a single gene called VKORC1. That gene controls how her body recycles vitamin K, which blood clotting depends on. One mutated version of it lets her eat the poison and simply keep clotting normally anyway. Manufacturers responded with stronger second-generation poisons, and resistance to those followed too. Every single poison humans have thrown at her so far has eventually run into resistant survivors. Put another way, if only 10% of a single litter survive to adulthood, the math still explodes. A colony that starts this spring can realistically have grandchildren breeding again by the fall. And every one of those grandchildren is already born knowing how to swim, gnaw, and hide. Now for one of the most stubborn urban legends about this animal, the one rat per person myth. People have repeated for generations that any big city has as many rats as residents. That idea actually comes from a 1909 study of rural England, not from any city at all. A naturalist named W.R. Boelter estimated England's rat population roughly matched its human population. That ratio was pure coincidence, tied to how many acres of farmland England happened to have. Somehow that one number got detached from its context and reattached to New York City. In 1949, a researcher named David Davis actually went out and tested the claim properly. He trapped rats, counted burrows, and measured droppings across blocks of East Harlem. His real estimate for New York was roughly 1 rat for every 36 people, not 1 to 1. That worked out to about 250,000 rats citywide, nowhere near the 8 million legend. A more recent 2014 analysis from Columbia University put the modern figure near 2 million. Still a lot of rats, but a small fraction of what the popular myth insists on. New York's relationship with this animal got so contentious it created an actual government job. In 2023, the city appointed its first ever rat czar, officially the director of rodent mitigation. Her name is Kathleen Karate, and her annual salary is $155,000. The job posting reportedly asked for someone highly motivated and somewhat bloodthirsty. The city backed her with a $3.5 million rat reduction zone covering Harlem. New York's rat fame had already gone viral years earlier thanks to one specific video. A rat was filmed dragging an entire slice of pizza down a subway staircase, alone, backward. The clip, nicknamed Pizza Rat, became one of the most shared New York moments of the decade. Now let's talk about what's actually happening inside her head, because it's more than you'd think. In the late 1990s, neuroscientist Jack Panksepp started an experiment that sounds like a joke. He gently tickled laboratory rats on the back of their necks with his fingertips. Microphones tuned to ultrasound picked up chirps at around 50 kilohertz, far above human hearing. Those chirps matched almost exactly the sounds rats make during normal play with each other. Panksepp and his colleagues concluded this was, functionally, rat laughter. The rats that laughed the most also turned out to be the most naturally playful individuals. Tickled rats began actively seeking out the specific human hands that had tickled them before. They'd run toward those hands, essentially asking for more, exactly like a ticklish kid would. This reframed laughter as something far older than language, humor, or even primates. It also raised an uncomfortable question: if she can laugh, what else can she feel? In 2011, researchers at the University of Chicago ran an experiment built to test exactly that. They placed a free rat in an enclosure with a cage mate trapped inside a clear plastic tube. Within about a week, the free rat learned to deliberately open the tube and release her friend. She did not do this for empty tubes, and she did not do it for tubes containing random objects. She freed her cage mate even in setups where the two of them couldn't physically interact afterward. Then researchers raised the stakes. They put chocolate in a second tube right next to the trapped rat. Most free rats opened both tubes and often shared the chocolate instead of eating it all herself. The researchers called this evidence of empathy-driven, pro-social behavior in a non-primate mammal. Not everyone in science accepted that interpretation without pushback, which is worth saying honestly. A follow-up study in 2014 argued the rats might simply want company, not be feeling empathy at all. The debate is still open, and that honesty is part of what makes the original finding interesting. Either way, something more complicated than a simple reflex is clearly happening in that tiny skull. Now to the part of this story where rats stop being a problem and start solving one. There's an organization called Apopo that trains a very different kind of rat entirely. It works with the African giant pouched rat, a completely different species from your sewer rat. They're too light to trigger a landmine, which turns out to be an enormous advantage. A trained rat can search an area the size of a tennis court for landmines in 30 minutes. A human deminer with a metal detector needs up to 4 days to clear that same patch of ground. The same rats are also trained to detect tuberculosis by smell alone in human sputum samples. A rat can screen 100 samples for TB in about 20 minutes flat. A human lab technician using a microscope needs roughly 4 days to process the same 100 samples. Every TB case a rat catches early is estimated to prevent 10 to 15 further infections down the line. The most decorated of these animals was a rat named Magawa, born in Tanzania in 2013. Over his career, Magawa detected dozens of landmines and unexploded devices in Cambodia. In 2020, he received the PDSA Gold Medal, the first rat ever given that award. He retired in 2021 and died peacefully the following year, having quite literally saved lives. Worth repeating, these hero rats are a completely different species from the ones in your walls. But they share the same nose, the same brain type, and honestly, the same reputation problem. Now to a slightly less heroic but very real branch of the rat family tree, the lab rat. The rats used in most biomedical research are a domesticated subspecies, Rattus norvegicus domestica. That's the exact same domesticated lineage behind pet fancy rats kept in homes worldwide. For over a century, this species has been one of the most heavily studied mammals on Earth. More of what we currently understand about mammalian biology traces back to this one species than to almost any other single animal humans have ever kept in a laboratory. The very first scientific study on a rat happened all the way back in 1828. Researchers used an albino rat to study fasting and protein quality in the body. That makes her, quite possibly, the first animal ever domesticated specifically for science. The real turning point came in 1906 at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia. Scientists there set out to breed a rat with predictable growth, reproduction, and behavior. Before that, every lab used random rats, and results barely matched between different buildings. The resulting bloodline became known as the Wistar rat, the first standardized lab animal ever made. More than half of all laboratory rats alive today are direct descendants of that one colony. She also became the default subject for early psychology, running mazes for decades of researchers. There's an odd tension built into her relationship with us that rarely gets acknowledged out loud. The same species we spend billions of dollars trying to poison, we also spend billions studying. Most modern medicine, from vaccines to painkillers, was tested on her body before it ever reached ours. She never volunteered for either role, the extermination or the research. We simply assigned both to her. Now to culture, because humanity's feelings about this animal are wildly inconsistent. In the Chinese zodiac, the rat isn't a villain. She's the very first sign of the entire cycle. According to legend, she won that spot by riding across a river on the back of an ox. then hopping off at the last second to cross the finish line first through pure cleverness. In Western folklore, she's almost the opposite, a symbol of filth, betrayal, and plague. In northwestern India, at the Karni Mata temple, that entire framing gets flipped upside down. The temple is home to somewhere around 15,000 to 25,000 rats, and they are worshipped, not feared. Devotees believe these rats are the reincarnated souls of the goddess's own descendants. Food nibbled on by the temple's rats is considered blessed rather than contaminated. Visitors eat and drink alongside thousands of rats running freely across the floor. It's one of the starkest cultural contrasts you'll find anywhere involving a single species. One more legend deserves a mention before we leave the topic of culture entirely. European folklore describes something called a rat king, a knot of rats fused at the tail. The tails supposedly tangle together with sap, blood, or filth until the animals can't separate. Actual preserved specimens do exist in a handful of European museums, so it isn't pure invention. Most researchers believe it happens rarely, and mainly among very young rats crowded into a nest. New Zealand offers one of the clearest case studies of what she can do to an isolated ecosystem. Polynesian settlers unknowingly brought the Pacific rat there roughly 7 centuries ago. European ships later added both the black rat and the brown rat over the following centuries. New Zealand's native birds had evolved for millions of years with no land mammal predators at all. Several flightless and ground-nesting species had simply never needed a defense against her. Some of those species declined sharply or disappeared entirely within a few generations of her arrival. Modern New Zealand now runs one of the most ambitious predator removal programs on the planet. The country has an official public goal of removing every rat, stoat, and possum by the year 2050. Now back to biology for one more genuinely strange detail before we wrap this up. Nobody bathes a wild rat and finds a friendly reaction, but her tail does something unexpected. She doesn't sweat and she doesn't pant, so she can't cool down the way dogs or humans do. Instead, she regulates body heat by expanding and contracting blood vessels inside her tail. Her tail works less like a decoration and more like a built-in radiator. It also helps with balance while climbing, and researchers suspect it may relay social signals too. Recent genetic work on New York City's wild rat populations found something else unexpected. Different neighborhoods carry rats with measurably distinct genetic profiles from one another. Populations barely mix across certain streets and highways, quietly evolving in isolation. An entire hidden map of separate rat lineages exists under a single city, mostly unnoticed. Back to her mind for a moment, because the tickling and empathy studies aren't the whole picture. She has been the default subject of maze learning research in psychology for more than a century. She can learn a complex maze layout after only a handful of runs and retain it for weeks. Some experiments suggest she can even judge her own confidence before answering a task correctly. That kind of self-assessment, called metacognition, was once assumed to be a uniquely human trait. Modern cities are structurally close to perfect rat habitat almost by accident. Sewers offer shelter, stable temperature, water, and an endless supply of food waste. Subway tunnels add heat, darkness, and direct highways running underneath entire neighborhoods. Every layer of urban infrastructure humans built for our own convenience, she quietly repurposed. Let's pause and recap a few myths this episode has actually taken apart so far. Myth 1. Her name says Norway, reality. She almost certainly evolved in East Asia. Myth 2. She single-handedly caused the Black Death, reality. Humans likely did that to each other. Myth 3. Any big city has one rat per person, reality. The real ratio is far lower. Myth 4. Rats are simple, unfeeling pests. Reality. She laughs and possibly empathizes. 4 myths, and every single one collapses the moment you actually check the sources. One more persistent idea deserves a quick correction, the notion that she is simply dirty by nature. She actually grooms herself extensively and spends a significant part of each day cleaning her fur. Most of her bad reputation for filth comes from the environments humans force her into, not her habits. Sewers and garbage piles are dirty because of what we put there, not because of anything she does. Pet fancy rats, kept in clean cages, show the exact same grooming behavior without any of the stigma. Let's also gather the raw numbers from this episode before we close things out. Her teeth grow roughly 5 inches per year if she stops gnawing completely. She can hold her breath underwater for about 3 minutes at a stretch. She can tread water continuously for up to 3 days without resting. A single pair of rats can theoretically produce around 1,250 descendants within 1 year. Real New York City likely holds somewhere close to 2 million rats, not 8 million. A trained hero rat clears a minefield-sized area 190 times faster than a human deminer. Her genus alone contains around 66 separate species, and most of us have only ever met 2 of them. She laughs at roughly 50 kilohertz, more than 10 times higher than a normal human voice. Her teeth, her ribs, her lungs, her nose, and quite possibly her emotions all outperform expectations. And every single one of those traits helped turn her into the most successful mammal on the planet after us. So let's return to where we started and put the entire picture back together at once. Here is an animal named after a country she has never once set foot in. An animal blamed for a plague that most likely spread through us, not through her. An animal that can drown-proof herself for 3 days and vanish through a coin-sized gap. An animal some cultures worship as a reincarnated ancestor and others pay to exterminate. An animal that risks her own comfort to free a trapped stranger, then shares the chocolate. An animal whose more exotic cousins now save thousands of human lives from mines and disease. And somewhere in a wall near you right now, an ordinary one is gnawing quietly through the night. Not out of malice, not out of any grand plan, just because her teeth never stop growing. She has no idea she was ever blamed for a plague or worshipped as a god or laughed at as a joke. She just needs a way through, a bit of food, and somewhere warm and dark to raise the next litter. Modern science still can't fully agree on whether what she feels counts as real empathy. That question remains open, and it says as much about our own definitions as it does about her. She isn't the villain of the story we were all taught, and she probably isn't a hero either. She's simply the one mammal that looked at human civilization and decided to move in permanently. Lifespan in the wild is usually only about 1 to 2 years, mostly due to predation and disease. In captivity, protected from all of that, she can live 2 to 3 years, sometimes slightly longer. That short lifespan is part of why her reproductive strategy leans so heavily on speed over longevity. She simply doesn't have time to wait, so evolution wired her to breed as early and as often as possible. Predators that specifically target her include owls, hawks, snakes, foxes, and of course domestic cats. Despite that long predator list, human cities have removed most of her natural predators already. Fewer predators, endless food waste, and warm shelter. That combination explains her urban success completely. There's a reason her scientific rebrand never really caught on outside of laboratories. To most people, she will always just be the rat, whatever her Latin name actually says. And maybe that's fair, because the label was wrong from the very first day someone wrote it down. Everything else about her, the swimming, the laughing, the surviving, turned out to be true. She didn't ask to be a villain, a god, a lab tool, or a landmine detector. She just adapted. And adaptation, it turns out, is the only trick that has ever mattered in evolution at all. Write in the comments, have you ever actually seen a rat swim or watched one laugh on camera? And which fact changed your opinion of her the most? The swimming, the empathy, or the plague?